Hello, we're going to continue our discussion of relationships, and I'm back in the relationships screen, which, as you recall, is under Database Tools. You click Relationships, and there you see your tables. And you'll recall what we did in the last video. After we created the schools table, we linked it in here on our own to the students table. So the school ID of the student is linked to the schools table. And look at the relationship, you highlight the link there, double click it, and of course we have the correct fields linked here. And you'll notice in here, even though these tables are linked and it shows that it's a one-to-many relationship, these don't show that it's one-to-many relationship. It's not giving as much information here. When you turn in your database, you're going to need to have links that, oh, I'm sorry, let me close out of that. That's a good example of the showing that actually in here, if you double click anywhere, you might get this screen. But we want to make sure we're highlighting and showing the actual link. So if you highlight it, click once, and it becomes darker there, you can see that we're working with that link. Now I'll double click, and it's showing the link, ID, and student volunteer. One thing that needs to happen with your tables and I'm going to take points off for this if you don't get it done in your database, is to enforce referential integrity. So make sure that is clicked and click OK. Those should always be set up. So we're going to fix these. Double click, enforce referential integrity. Finish the last one here, and you'll notice you need to make sure that they've got the right one. There, I've highlighted it. Becomes darker and bold there. Double click, enforce referential integrity. So this is how I'm going to want the relationships in your database to look like, so that it'll show the one to many and that all the tables are linked. If that's not set up, there'll be points taken off. I'm going to switch over to a totally different database now. I want to show you some examples of what the relationships should not look like. I've switched over here to a completely different database, and this is a database that someone built. You don't need to know all the details of it, but basically this is a database that is tracking cosmetic products and brand names of cosmetic products. So you see something here on face, lips, eyes, and another table that holds the brand names here. And then you see a table on consumers. So the idea of the database was good, something to track consumers and looking at it and ranking cosmetic products. But there are numerous errors in here with the building of the relationships. And if you look closely, you'll see lots of problems. First of all, there's this consumers table that's hanging out here that's not at all connected to anything. Every table should somehow be connected to another table in there somehow. And then you see the brands table. This person that built the database put it in here twice, so there's brands and then there's a brands _1. It's really the same table. There would be no reason the table should be in here twice. And then if you look closer at some of the links in here, you see problems. So on the face table, it should be linking on ID somehow. Generally, you want the ID field of your table to be linked somewhere, somehow to another table. And that's not linked at all. Also in this lips table, the ID is not linked at all. You kind of see this random link between price and price range in another table. That doesn't make any sense at all. This is a monetary field and another price range type field. I just don't see where that kind of link would ever be in there. And then lastly, you notice too, you do see a link here that's based on ID and one-to-many. That's good. That's the kind of thing I would be looking for because it means that the referential integrity box has been clicked here to enforce referential integrity. But it's not in any other of the other links in here. So if you see some of these other connections, none of them have the one-to-many. So there are numerous problems in here if you compare this to the relationships I have in the student service database. I want to point that out so you are aware and don't put some of these strange things in your table relationships. As I mentioned earlier, of course, you can set up the force referential integrity when you do the lookup and relationship data type and then check to enforce referential integrity. What I've showed here is just an alternate way of doing it. In either case, you do need to have it set up in there. Want to point out something else here. I said earlier, we're going to ignore these, the cascade update and the cascade delete. And I'm not going to require that at all with your tables. I'm going to explain it a little bit, and if you want to read in your book, there's more information about it. Basically, what that means, if you do a cascade delete, for instance, it would say a school is no longer around. Say you have students and you have the school, but maybe for whatever reason the school has closed. What it would mean is if you deleted the school, it would force you to also delete those student records. So if we look over here, say there was a school in the schools table over here, and I deleted it, if this was checked to cascade delete, it would also delete those student records. And there are times maybe you really don't want to delete those records, maybe for historical purposes, maybe you don't need to track the school anymore, but you want to keep the school records. So that's, it depends on the circumstances, whether you really want to do those cascades in there. I'm not going to require it at all, so if it's easier, just leave that, leave those unchecked, but you definitely need the enforced referential integrity. Something else to be aware of in here with relationships, you generally always, the type of item that you're connecting to between two fields, they should be the same data type and the same kind of field. You'll see something in here that looks funny. Okay, for our organizations table, we have a primary key and it's an ID, it's an auto number ID. And then over here, it looks like it's linking to organization name. And so why would a number field here be connecting to what looks like a text field, a name field? And it's not actually doing that. It's confusing, and it'll become clear if we go back, close out of here, and look at the service events table at the organization name. I'm going to close that. And I can see, yes, save the changes. And if I look at the service events table here and go to design, you'll notice here what it's linking to, the organization name. It says number, even though in the view it's displaying the name. The reason that's happening is because what we did here, we created it as a lookup. Let's go back, design, organization name. And if you look down here at the properties at the bottom, you'll see, yes, again, it's a number field, in this case, a long integer. If we click on this tab that says lookup, what it's actually doing is a small query in here. Select organization's ID name from organizations table. And you recall when we created that, it was a lookup field. Let's go back, datasheet view. And it's a lookup where we can only pull from the organization's table. It's actually storing the ID in there even though we don't see it, and it's linking on that ID to the ID in the organization's table. I don't want you to be confused about that. It's perfectly fine that it's working that way. While we're on the organizations table here, I want you to notice something else. On the left side, I haven't talked about this, you'll see that plus sign on certain tables. And if you click it, what you'll see is the events for each organization. So again, it's a one-to-many relationship, which Access is good at, and linking these tables, and it's showing here that for each organization, the events that have been set up, the service events. So what you're seeing is a table and a subtable. So here, American Cancer Society has two events, one in May, one in November, and two records filled in. You could actually fill in another event here, or let's say we go back to St. Joseph and put in an event, let's say in October 10th, they want 8 volunteers, or this, we need the student volunteer names. Let's put in a few, again, multiple values, number, if I can't see that, I can always expand it, number of volunteers, 8, and let's say they want $400. So you get the little symbol here, the pencil symbol indicating we've added a new record. And so that, again, is showing the link between the tables and a different way of seeing all that. You'll see that with other tables also. If we go to the schools table, and then for each school, you could have multiple students, and it's showing here the students that are listed for each school. I'm going to close this out and close this out. Let's close all of them. And by the way, this is another message you'll see in Access. It says, do you want to save changes to the layout of table? I want you to notice that it says layout. What that means, it's asking us to say if we want to save it, because what we did, rather than we're changing the table itself, all we did was change the layout. We expanded the column there so we could see something better. And it's just saying, that's typically what it means, saving the layout. It's like you've changed the appearance, the width of the column or something. So usually that's safe. Just say yes, close it out. If we look more at the students table, I want to point out something also. Even though we're forcing referential integrity, some of the students are not listed for a school. And that's okay. In this case, we can have null values in there, nothing in there, and it accepts it. It's just, it would cause an error if we put in bad data. So just something to be aware of. And one more thing I want to point out with relationships, I'm going to close this out. Let's go back, look at our relationships. Some terminology you might hear, we've already said that's the primary key, and each of your tables for what you turn in should have a primary key like that. A term you might hear when connecting tables is this is the foreign key. So in other words, in our schools table, this is the primary key of the schools table, but school ID is what's called a foreign key in the students table. So that is a terminology you might read in the textbook or you may hear about.